This episode of Distraction is sponsored by Landmark College, offering comprehensive support for students with learning disabilities, ADHD, and ASD. Learn more at lcdistraction.org. Landmark College, we teach differently.
Let's normalize the term mental health. It doesn't mean anything different in terms of what it's about than brain health or bunion health or whatever, type of health. So why are we putting a bad connotation on that term? We all need to have it. And when big business aligns themselves with mental health, you know that things are moving in a more open, caring space.
Hello, this is Dr. Ned Hallowell, your host of Distraction. Today, I am really happy to have a woman that I met not in person, but by coming on her show. Her name is Kristin Walker. She is one of the most lively, dynamic women I've ever met virtually. I'm going to encourage her, first of all, to talk about herself, and then to talk about the extraordinarily important work she does in the realm of mental health. So, Kristin Walker, the CEO of Mental Health News Radio, could you begin by talking about the recent diagnosis and treatment you received?
Absolutely. I'm so glad to be on your show. We had a great time on my show. Actually, I had already taken the online test, which I won't butcher and say where it is, but the one that everybody takes or that they give to everyone about ADHD and ADD. Mm-hmm. And I had actually done it on the air with a psychiatrist that comes on my show regularly, and I was so high on both sides. And so by the time I interviewed you, I was already in my head that this is what I have, but you just solidified it for me, and that's when I went, okay, I need to go to a doctor and talk about possible, treatment options for this. So I actually didn't find out that I had this in any way, shape, or form until I was 48, and I'm 48 now. Mm-hmm. So just a few months ago did I realize that, this is something that I have, and then I went to my doctor, talked about different types of medication, tried a few things, found what works for me, and it's like I'm living on a whole other planet. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, what's the difference?
Well, I'm able to focus. I'm able to get more done, and I'm already somebody that does Herculean things. But my ability to do it in a focused way and in a way that doesn't wear me out, I spent so much time having to being exhausted emotionally, mentally, physically at trying to keep myself focused, that now that I have medication, I actually have more energy, more passion to enjoy, more emotional room to enjoy what it is I do, which is a lot, because I have this medication that helps me really laser in and not have to climb this hurdle in order to do everything I need to get done.
Yeah. Now, some people would say, gee, you were very successful up until age 48. Why in the world did you need to get any kind of diagnosis and treatment?
Well, yeah, certainly people could say that. I'd say I was in a very traumatic environment my entire life, and I grew up in a very, very traumatic environment, and so I was used to stress and trauma constantly, and I made a big life change at the age of 47 where I really got out of that trauma and made a more peaceful life for myself. So once I did that, I wasn't getting the dopamine hit anymore from the constant trauma in my life. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, this person who could do a million different things because I needed the dopamine hit of doing that, and I had all this trauma giving me that as well, I didn't have the trauma anymore in my personal life, and I started to take a nosedive. And that's where medication came in and helped me, and it helps me in a way that's healthy to live my life, not in the, let me chase around a bunch of toxic people and have that stimulus so I have more dopamine.
So oddly enough, you had been self-medicating with stress, which
absolutely, absolutely.
A lot of people with ADD do, and it's not a good way to go. But you had been getting by self-medicating with stress, with toxic stress. And then when you took the healthy step of getting out of that toxic stress, your performance declined. And so you got the diagnosis and you got the medication, a much healthier way of getting that dopamine. And now you've got clear sailing.
I was just agreeing exactly.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, so you're living proof of getting diagnosed at a later age 48, and the effectiveness, the importance of the diagnosis really at any age, and the effectiveness of medication at any age. And you take it and no side effects and just benefit, right?
Yeah, it's been a benefit. The only side effect, which I understand is not attributed to the medication, is that when it starts to wear off, in the beginning, when I first started taking the medication, I would get really irritated, and I was worried about my blood pressure because my blood pressure tends to be high. Mm-hmm. But we worked all that out. My blood pressure is, 110/70, so no issues there. Mm-hmm. And my doctor explained to me that, listen, you're not getting the medication is not making you more irritable. It's that you got a nice 8 to 10 hours of not having monkey brain. And so when it starts to come back, because the medication is tapering off at the, end of the day, you're just kind of irritated at having to work that hard again to keep the focus. And once I understood that, cognitively, then I was like, okay, well, that I can deal with, as long as it's not the medication making me aggressive. And I wasn't aggressive. I just felt, a little irritated. As long as I knew that, it was, that made things okay. And also the diagnosis was so validating.
Yes.
Because I didn't go to school. There's no way that I would have been able to get through school, sit and be in a classroom. That's not where I focused my attention. My attention was always focused on work. And so I carried a lot of shame from my family about not having a degree in anything. And so once I got the diagnosis, I was able to just say, oh, I don't need to be ashamed. I literally, physically would never have been able to make it anyway. So there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah. One little suggestion about that when it wears off, you might ask your doctor to give you a short-acting medication to take then. I call it in kids the homework pill. To take at the end of the day and time it so that it wears off by the time you go to bed.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right, good. I will.
Because that can, instead of just putting up with the absence of the medication, a typical dosing regimen is you take a long-acting pill to cover you during the day, and then a short-acting pill. In kids, I call it the homework pill, that you take at the end of the day when the long-acting pill wears off.
Okay, good. I'm taking notes on your show.
It's a good little trick I've learned over the years. So, well, now your growing up years, you didn't go to school?
I did. I mean, I went to, primary school and grade school and all that, but there was so much trauma. I'm a sexual abuse survivor at the hands of my biological father and all kinds of other lovely, wonderful things.
Wow.
But I just, I couldn't focus in school. What I mean by not going to school later is I didn't go to college. Uh-huh. And everybody in my family has, 27 degrees and from Harvard and Yale and whatever. So that was a big pall over me, I guess.
So you graduated high school and then you stopped?
I tested out of high school when I was 16 because I couldn't take it anymore and went to work full time. So I tested out early, but I did graduate.
You got a GED?
In California, it's called a proficiency test. I don't know if they do that anymore, but That's what it was then. But it's the equivalent of a GED.
So at age 16, you stopped school.
Yep.
And you went to work.
Yeah, I had a full-time job and a part-time job, and I just thrived in the really hectic work environment I was in, because it obviously kept my brain moving and fed me in a way that sitting in a lecture in a classroom was never going to happen. I would just immediately go to sleep, and I couldn't concentrate.
And what kind of jobs did you have?
I worked at different jobs. I was always running some kind of like a hair salon or a store of some kind. It was always, and I was always selling something because I have the personality to do that. So it was me doing a lot of sales and a lot of administrative type work.
Wow. And you were good at that.
Yeah, I was really good at it. I also did a lot of public speaking. From the time I was 15, I was speaking about sexual abuse in front of, doctors and nurses and so on at conferences, and psychiatrists and psychologists. So I did a lot of volunteer work as well as the work stuff. So, I was always busy. Need to keep this brain moving.
Wow. Tell the rest of the story. What happened?
Well, I got married and had a child, and my life went into, raising my child, and I threw everything into doing that, and then started my own business at 27, and I've been an entrepreneur since I was 27 years old, and the lifestyle of that, the risk of it helped a lot.
What was the business?
I was a consultant. I worked with databases and set up databases for large companies like Assurant Healthcare and Perot Systems, which was bought by Dell. Dell became a client. So I worked on big, huge contracts, a lot of risk involved, and a lot of moving parts. And that was my career for a long time until I got into working in the behavioral health market with technology, and would go in and consult with agencies on the kind of technology they're using, and because it was databases as well. And then I became a guest host on a podcast and loved it, and decided to launch a podcast of my own that was 100% mental health focused, and did really well with it. Became the podcaster for several notable conferences, and just did what I do with these kind of things, work way too hard. And then about 2 years ago, some of my guests said, "Hey, you know what you're doing? We want our own podcast. Will you produce podcasts for us and create a network?" And so I did, and now we have 40 shows on our network, all covering different aspects of mental health, and we're still the only mental health-focused podcast network in the world. And
it's called Mental Health News Radio?
My show is Mental Health News Radio, and the network is just Mental Health News Radio Network.
And what's Everything EHR?
That's my consulting firm. I still do a little bit of consulting in behavioral health on electronic health record technology, a little bit, because it fascinates me. But that's the company that that I was doing in behavioral health when I started my podcast.
And then you said you got out of a traumatic situation last year. What was that?
Well, I had moved back home to live with my mother after my stepfather passed away. And
had you divorced your husband?
Yeah, my husband, we both have one child, and it's our child together, and he's my best friend. He's a case study in ADHD. He makes me look like I'm a koala bear. But I moved back home, and it was wonderful in that I needed to see my mother as an adult, but the mental illness, the narcissistic personality disorder, all the things that I couldn't see as a kid, I got full force living with her as an adult, and it was just one chaotic, horrible experience after another that I attributed to grief, because I thought, well, this is what happens when people grieve their spouse, they act this way. And it was a slowly waking up of, this has nothing to do with grief. She's been this way your whole life.
Yeah.
So I left. I left the home after yet another catastrophe, disaster, screaming, yelling, rage fit, and went, okay, you need to really focus on your home environment and have a safe space for you instead of taking care of everybody else. And that's what I did, and that's where I'm at. I'm on a little organic farm in Virginia now with my horse, and the only person that runs the emotions of this house is me.
That's wonderful. And where is your child?
He's grown up, and he's down in Florida.
Ah, what does he do?
He works for an insurance company, very boring job, but I think being raised by an entrepreneur, he wanted safe and steady.
And where is your ex-husband?
He's in a different state, but we talk about 8 times a day. But,
oh, wow.
We're very close. Not ever going to be a couple again, but we're each other's best friend because we went through hell together. His childhood makes mine look like a walk in the park.
Wow, boy. So talk to me then about the world of mental health and what you've learned personally and now professionally.
Well, I've learned that obviously stigma needs to be eradicated. I think some of the biggest things I've learned is that for whatever reason, this sector of healthcare, people took the term mental health and merged it with the term mental illness. And you don't, physical health and physical illness are allowed to be 2 separate things, but that isn't so with mental health. Neither term should be stigmatized. It's been interesting to watch industries, even people in the field of mental health, not want to be tied to the term mental health, thinking that it's mental illness. And that's been really an eye-opener for me. So I've adopted that as another one of my missions of let's normalize the term mental health. It doesn't mean anything different in terms of what it's about than brain health or bunion health or whatever, type of health. So why are we putting a bad connotation on that term? We all need to have it.
But also, as I think we said when I was on your show, the fact is that most people who have great talent also struggle with one or another of the conditions we diagnose as so-called mental illnesses.
Absolutely.
So let's stop stigmatizing them, making people ashamed of them, and say, I see these conditions as markers of talent, whether it's ADHD or dyslexia or depression or bipolar disorder or an anxiety disorder. Most people who have great talent have one or another of those.
Yeah, that's a great piece, too, about it is that normalization of it, I think, is part of I see a change in people starting to open up and talk about their own struggles. And really, these are human being struggles that everyone goes through. Yeah. It's not those people over there. Yeah,
the wackos. The way we talk about these people is it's the one area that political correctness has not hit. It's socially acceptable to talk about sickos and wackos and weirdos.
Crazy people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why people are so nervous about it is because it's so closely tied to, you're an unstable person who doesn't know how to live right.
Right.
If you talk about mental health. And instead of, and this is what I love about what you write about and what you talk about, is taking these diagnoses, which are not meant to be a harsh label. They're meant to enlighten you and to empower you and say, look, these have gifts. Celebrate them.
Right, exactly. And it has nothing to do with character. I think people confuse. You can be a person of upstanding character and suffer from depression, or upstanding character and suffer from bipolar disorder, or in my own case, I have both ADHD and dyslexia, and I like to think I have upstanding character. The moral diagnosis is what undermines the whole thing. You say you have ADHD, well, you must be unreliable and undependable and a bad person, and so people are ashamed to talk about it.
Yeah, or it's just used as a pithy throwaway thing that people don't really understand. Oh, well, that's my ADHD talking. And I've said those things too, but now that I understand it, I'm like, oh, this is not a throwaway statement. And in some ways, this has been how I survived. I mean, it was also created genetically. Yes, I have taken the genetic test. I am, I have the alleles that show the markers. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but, that of having ADHD. But I also was born into toxic and traumatic environment. So even if I was born with it, it was going to be fostered because of the environment I grew up in. Yeah. And that's nothing for me to be ashamed of. That's just what happened.
No, it's also what's helped you survive.
Absolutely. I would never, without everything that I had been through, I would have never been able to make it in media of all places.
Yeah, it's why you're so resourceful and spunky and tough, and you always bounce back. And look at you managing all these podcasts, and not to mention, I'm sure you manage a lot of difficult people.
Oh, my goodness. There's a reason why my network has the most shows about narcissistic personality disorder on the planet.
What if our listeners want to listen to some of these podcasts? How do they find them?
If people want to type, they can go to mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, or they can go to mhnrnetwork.com, and right at the top you'll see shows, and there is the list of all the different shows that we do. Everybody's on iTunes and Stitcher, and we have 70 other places. I'm on a smart television network with my show, and we're on YouTube. So go to that site, you'll find every show, and you'll be able to subscribe right there on any of the podcaster pages to the show that resonates with you.
And do you have different shows devoted to different conditions? How does it work?
Yeah, we do. We have shows, obviously, that are about addiction. We have shows that it's a mixed bag. We do have different conditions, like we're getting ready to do a show about dissociative identity disorder, and so there's that piece, and then there's also the piece where we have first responders that have recovered from addiction that talk about, mental health and first responders. So it's kind of all over the map. And then we also have places like McLean Hospital in Boston who does their podcast with us. We have an autism hospital, Springbrook Behavioral Health, that we do an autism podcast for them. So it's individuals, and then it's also entities that wanted to get into this medium. So it's pretty cool. We don't say no to. We have a show coming up that's going to be just about complex PTSD. So it's really whatever anybody wants to talk about related to this topic. They're welcome to take a look at what we do and see if it's a fit.
And are as difficult as Stigma can be, do you see the pendulum moving? Do you see improvement coming?
I do. I see it coming. I definitely see it coming. I think things like Walmart opening up mental health clinics, people can say all they want about that, and there can be pros and cons, but when big business aligns themselves with mental health, that things are moving in a more open, caring space.
I hadn't heard about that. Walmart has opened up mental health clinics?
Yeah, they just opened up. I just was on a news show about this.
That's fantastic.
They just opened up a clinic. Now, Beacon Health is the one that runs the clinic. It's not Walmart that runs it.
Yeah.
But they're going to have clinics in Walmart.
That's fantastic.
Mental health clinics.
That's fantastic. That's wonderful.
Yep, I love it. That tells me, when you see big business behind something like that. Because, Walmart has nail salons in Walmart, but they don't do a big press release about how they are opening nail salons in Walmart. But they did do it about the mental health piece because they know it's good for business to align yourself with it.
That's a really great sign. I think you're exactly right. When Walmart starts putting a mental health clinic in its stores, that means, my gosh, Kristin, we've arrived.
And we'll never be out of business. We don't need we don't need Stigma to exist in order to stay in the business of mental health. That's the great thing. We will always be able to be of service here.
Yep.
Whether it's fighting stigma, or it's, hey, let's usher in a new breed of how to really care for people without the stigma. So it's wonderful for those of us that work in this field. We'll never have to worry about, getting a day job making widgets.
Really, I just wish before I die, I turned 69 yesterday, so I just hope before I die that people will realize that these conditions really are markers of talent, that that we shouldn't be shunned. We should be sure we need help, but who doesn't need help?
Absolutely.
We just have so much to contribute, and we have contributed so much. I mean, that's
absolutely,
that's what the world needs to know. I mean, and you're doing a lot to tell the world. I mean, my gosh, Kristin, you are doing so much. How many shows? 40?
40, yeah. Some of them just started, so they haven't, they're in post, or they're in pre-production now. But, it's good that there's the care there to want to do this kind of a thing. So we're going to just keep riding the crest of being information givers on this particular topic. Well,
boy, oh boy, is there ever a need for it. And thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a wonderful conversation, and your own personal story is inspiring, and the work you're doing is also just tremendously inspiring. The Mental Health News Radio Network, tremendously important. And people want to learn more, just go to mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. Kristin Walker, a survivor of trauma, a woman who just by dint of spunk and grit, not only survived but is giving back big time to the rest of the world, and a inspiration to me and to everyone who's listening. I can't thank you enough for coming on and joining us. Mental Health News Radio Network and Kristin Walker. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we have a favor to ask. We're trying to learn more about you, our listeners. So we just released a brief survey on our website at distractionpodcast.com. There are only 9 questions, so it should only take a couple of minutes to fill out, if that. We're going to take your answers and incorporate your feedback into the podcast. We really appreciate our distraction community, and we want to continue to give you the kinds of episodes you want to hear. So this survey will help us do that. Again, just head over to distractionpodcast.com, click on the word survey in the upper right corner of the home page, answer the 9 questions, and you tell me. I'll bet it won't take you even a minute. And it really will help us, because then we can tailor what we do to what you guys and ladies want. Thank you so much. Please send us your questions, your show ideas, and feedback. We need these. We thrive on them. Questions, show ideas, feedback to connect@distractionpodcast.com. That's connect@distractionpodcast.com. Or call and leave us a voice message at 844-55-CONNECT. That's 844-55-CONNECT. We look forward to hearing from you. Distraction is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcasts for curious people. Our editor is the very intelligent Chris Latham. Our producer is the inimitable and irrepressible Sarah Gurton. And our audio engineers are the always punctual Pat Keogh and the brilliant Roman Zeitlin.